So welcome everybody. My name is Margot Cuss. I'm one of the fabulous crew that puts together this HRI seminar series that we do monthly during semesters. And it's really important, these kind of initiatives, to acknowledge that they're a really cross-campus effort and that they involve support and enthusiasm from lots of different parts of across campus. So here's part of the groups that are involved, and then there's also others that are contributing in particular to the Health Research Institute. So I'll ask our organising crew, including Shana, to put up their hand. So you guys put up your hand. Sarah, Rachel, put up your hand. This is the organising crew, and where's Chelsea? There she is. She's trying to hide. And Damon and Shana are our student reps, and today that's been particularly a student-oriented session where we like to imagine creative and other ways to communicate our research experiences. So I'll let Shana share with you a little bit more about our strategy, but we have an upcoming very exciting seminar on April the 3rd. We're always open to ideas for other presenters or suggestions or students or postdocs that have ideas about what they'd like to see in the seminar series. And we're also really delighted that there are some of you that are doing this as an integral part of your course, which I think is great, giving you exposure to a whole lot of different kinds of health research. But we're coming up to the end of our first year, aren't we?
Next month.
So this will be the first year, and we're always looking forward to ideas. So I am Rachel's the person that would be happy to receive any ideas or suggestions at any time. It's easy to find her on the website. But it's a real pleasure now to hand over to one of the instigators of this exciting session, Shana Dolan. So thanks, Shana.
All right. Thank you. So just to start off, acknowledging the territory that we're on today. And although this is always an important thing to do, I think today using the Pecha Kucha format, which is not something new. It's boring on a bunch of different things, and particularly, obviously, oral storytelling is a huge part of First Nations culture. So just to make that link and be mindful of that. So this is our student Pecha Kucha presentation. This started with an idea from Margot, who thought that this would be a really interesting format to use for not only students, but anyone to kind of present their work in a different sort of format. A couple of weeks ago, we held a training session that was open to everyone on campus, just to learn more about Pecha Kucha and to start thinking about how students would present their work in a visual way. So just a bit of background briefly. We're using the 20 by 20 format, which is the standard Pecha Kucha, so 20 slides for 20 seconds each. The slides advancing automatically, which can be quite an interesting thing, and so give a lot of support to the presenters today to keep on time for that. Developed in Tokyo by two architects, and okay. And meant to be really informal and cover a wide variety of topics and speak loudly when you have other events going on next door. So we'll get started now. We're going to have 5 Pecha Kuchas. We can take a few burning questions in between if people have them on the topics that people are presenting on. And then otherwise, we'll have all the presenters come back up and field some more questions. Wow. Okay. All right. So I'll have Marika come up. That out. Yes. So Marika is a familiar face on campus here. She works with the Cumulative Impact Research Consortium, as well as being a postdoc here. So she's going to present on some work that she's done. Wow. Well done, Marika. This is all planned. So, are we ready?
Good afternoon. My name is Marika Sachs, and I'm going to talk about the traditional medical system of northern Peru, where I did my doctoral research. From the patient's perspective, what's most important about a curative treatment is what they can access with their resources, what they are comfortable with, and what works to return them to everyday life. Indigenous peoples throughout the Andes of Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador accommodate medical pluralism. People consider both biomedicine and traditional medicine to be helpful and balanced. But while biomedicine can only treat the body, traditional medicine can also heal social and spiritual ill-being. Different genres of healing respond to different causal agents. The cause of the illness is not known at the onset of symptoms. People have numerous curative options for minor illnesses, but as the condition persists or worsens, their options become limited to advanced doctors and traditional specialists. Home remedies are always the first line of defense for everyday conditions like headaches, skin irritations, and upset stomach. Household remedies are often topical or consumable and described in the local idiom of healing through cleansing and extracting. For example, slices of potato tightly wrapped around the head are described as drawing out a headache. A rash caused by walking by a noxious plant can be prevented from spreading by pricking the affected area with a needle. And a drink of floral water can cleanse an upset stomach. If the symptoms persist or worsen, a person can visit the local medical post for a pill or injection. The government-run medical post is serviced by Spanish-speaking mestizo doctors and nurses who come from coastal cities for 2-week rotation. Many of the Quechua-speaking community members are uncomfortable visiting the medical post because they know the doctors often consider them to be poor, superstitious, and without any worthwhile knowledge or assets of their own. Patients must also have a government-issued identification card, which many people in the countryside lack. The most common visitors are women with young children. Mothers bring their infants for checkups and vaccinations, and in exchange receive a basket of basic foodstuffs. However, community members tend to trust local healers more than foreign doctors, and medical staff remain outsiders. For these reasons, community members often prefer local healers over doctors. Herbalists, for example, diagnose and treat persistent but non-life-threatening conditions attributed to infections and excessive exposure to cold, heat, light, wind, and other environmental elements. Herbalists are almost always women. They have specialized knowledge passed down to them from their mothers and grandmothers, and they are respected healthcare providers in their communities. These women can prepare a variety of herbal remedies that include anywhere from 5 to 20 wild and cultivated plants. The herbalist boils the plants to make a concentrated tea and gives it to the client with instructions such as drink a cup, heat it up, morning and night, with fresh lime juice for 2 weeks. Come to see me again if you don't feel better. Yet sometimes accessible and affordable options fail to cure the person's symptoms. Is the illness caused by a serious microscopic agent or biophysical dysfunction? Or is it due to a spiritual force? Often a person tries several courses of treatment until they find one that resolves their symptoms. Biomedicine doesn't offer cultural safety, and a trip to the city is beyond the financial resources of many. However, if the condition is life-threatening, a person will make the 4-hour drive or 8-hour hike to the highway to take a bus to the nearest city. Likely reasons for such a trip are surgery and cancer treatment. But a visit to the hospital won't cure all types of ill-being. A person may have trouble eating or sleeping, feel listless or active normally, or have persistent but non-acute pain. In this case, the condition will likely be attributed to either a little devil or paramount spiritual force. Such illness can be diagnosed by a gifted herbalist who does cleansing with guinea pig. One type of illness is called soul loss. Malicious devils live in particular streams, gullies, hillsides, and rocks. These spirits are hungry and will grab the soul of a person passing by to feed on their vitalizing energy. Without this essential part of the person, the victim will weaken and eventually die. A live guinea pig is rubbed over the client's body. The animal extracts some of the illness and takes on the inner condition of the person. The herbalist examines the state of the animal's organs. She prepares a herbal remedy or another response based on her diagnosis. In the case of soul loss, she ritually feeds the offending spirit in order to return the victim's soul to their body. Both biomedicine and traditional medicine can treat a wide range of bodily conditions, but only traditional healers can cure illness that affects the immaterial parts of the person. Sometimes the illness is not caused by a hungry little devil in a stream, however, and sometimes it's caused by a more powerful spiritual agent. These paramount spirits are called enchantments. Only sorcerers can directly communicate with the individualized spirits embodied in the local landscape and intercede on the client's behalf. These men have a special gift and have apprenticed for many years under a master sorcerer. During an all-night healing ceremony, and with the help of tobacco and the psychotropic cactus, San Pedro, the sorcerer enters the spirit world. Through sacred songs, he talks with the spirits and finds out how to cure his client. He places sacred objects on the client's body to suck out the illness that has become lodged there and dispatch it back to the enchantment from where the sickening energy originated. If stalkers don't recognize these entities, they can do nothing for illness caused by either malicious devils or the powerful spirits that are also mountains, lakes, and waterfalls. In northern Peru, only doctors can treat cancer, but only sorcerers can treat illness attributed to earth.
Be sitting here all day.
Oh, God. Great job, Marika. So if anyone has any questions for Marika before we move on to the next, I'll just ask everyone on Blue Jeans if they could please just mute themselves.
Oh yeah, if you walk through here, like walk through the buildings, you'll lose connection.
Okay.
Someone else could help in that volume.
Go. Okay. So Mike.
Thanks.
Yes, but if you walk through the buildings,
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
You just talked about
that is your mistake. You're just getting access points.
the shift that people undergo to be part of that, like to become
Just
closer.
get to give
Like, are
it
people identified in the community, or is that something that they themselves identify?
to reconnect.
Would there be somebody that's identified with a special gift?
Well, it's very common for shamans, even though they're called sorcerers, but they're shamans because they entered the spirit world and can intercede on the client's behalf. And it's very common in shamanic traditions for people to be identified through grave illness, and then they go to a healer for healing, and that healer identifies them as having the special gift. And very often, it's precisely those people who don't want to engage with that have that inherent, what is recognized as an inherent capacity. Yeah.
What's the healing rate?
I have no idea. I went as an anthropologist.
Okay.
So I was interested in understanding what the local logic is, and in particular, what these earth beings are about. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Mike Eady, and I'm a graduate student here at the School of Health Sciences at UNBC. I started my master's back in September of 2015 under the guidance of Dr. Pecha and Dr. Harris, and I wanted to investigate how wildfire fighters' respiratory health is impacted across their occupation during a season. I also went by another name more recently. This was me as Titan Alpha 2 as part of the Vanderhoof Titan unit crew. There I spent 3 summers working as a wildfire fighter myself. And this helped to provide an excellent contrast between the working world and academia, and to help synergize a project between the two. So wildfire fighting itself is an incredibly arduous task with a lot of manual labor. Shifts can last anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, and you really don't know the shift duration until you're working in that shift. This occupation, while rewarding, has the potential to impact your health in a bunch of different ways while giving you little or no time for recovery between shifts. The recovery during the summer is incredibly hard. Between those shifts I mentioned, you're spending time basically in your tent, sleeping to repeat the process the next day. Some shifts can be slow, however, offering the wildfire fighters some reprieve. It was during one of these slower days that I was inspired to get lost in thought, to think about what breathing all this wildfire smoke was doing to impact my respiratory health. It was this turning point that helped me prolong the age-old question of what I'm going to be when I grow up. So as I was an undergraduate at the time, but this sparked me to start my master's project in September of 2015 to look at the occupational impact of the respiratory health of this occupation specifically. To my surprise, this graduate study I dreamed up started to get external funding from sources such as the BC Real Estate Foundation and even interested parties such as WorkSafe BC. The project was then set up to measure the spirometric respiratory pressures and blood hemodynamics of accessory respiratory muscles themselves, which was all something that was quite exciting. The summer of 2016 turned out to be a period of exploratory research as the investigation turned more into a pilot project to work out any kinks in the protocol that we have. This turned out to be a good thing as the 2016 wildfire season was actually incredibly slow with very few exposure days. Despite this fact, we did manage to get a decline or observe a decline in all the respiratory values that we did look at. For that particular fire season, I was granted access to my home Vanderhoof crew to investigate how the respiratory health was impacted by the wildfire season. I was able to work out the protocols and figure out different timings and order of process in order to get it right for the following year. This gave me the opportunity to try out new things that I thought might or might not work with this particular population. In between the time of 2016 and 2017, I continued on with my master's. However, I would constantly be thinking about ways that I could improve this research question and to improve the health of this population. So improvements included adding a pre and post-season fitness test, which would give me a level of fitness change. But what I really wanted to do is see what changes occurred across the shift. The 2017 wildfire season turned out to be an incredible research experience. I knew what to expect. I had modified my study protocols, and it would be much more relevant to the wildfire fighter population. I had all of my equipment well in advance, and I even built my own fitness test steps, which was probably the proudest thing of my master's. WorkSafe BC also renewed their funding and expressed continued interest in the project. I was granted access to not one, but 3 different wildfire crews out of the BC Prince George Fire Center. And this would help me to compare specific details between crews, which was nice. They also agreed to allow me to look at one of those particular crews in a cross-shift setting, which was incredible. Fortunately for a graduate student studying wildfire fighters, 2017 fire season turned out to be a pretty good one. The average fire line days exposed for these crews totaled just over 60 days, and all of that hard work would result in an increased ventilation rate across their shifts, which theoretically increased the wildfire exposure for this population. For the cross-shift investigation, we didn't have access to the fire line itself, so it was impossible to gauge their actual smoke exposure. However, carbon monoxide acts as a surrogate for particulate matter, so the next best case we did is send out each of these wildfire fighters with a personal carbon monoxide monitor to get an idea of their exposure. Spending a couple weeks with these wildfire fighters gave me an idea of the level of fatigue they're experiencing already just halfway through the wildfire season. To add to this fatigue, I also got them to blow into a bunch of tubes every morning and every night, which I'm sure they were incredibly appreciative of. To illustrate this, this is a picture of one of the participants blowing into a tube at 4 in the morning, right before their shift. After everything was said and done, we managed to have 34 wildfire fighters participate in our cross-season investigation. Respiratory volumes declined again in 2017 as they did in 2016, with significant declines in FEV1 as well as peak expiratory flow. And our cross-season investigation included 20 wildfire fighters, which was incredibly exciting. So what's next for us in our project? I've analyzed the cross-season data, and the good news is that our findings agree with what the limited literature available for this population say. The cross-shift data is still being analyzed by myself, but preliminary looks show that the carbon monoxide exposure alone is quite interesting, showing levels well above the short-term exposure limit outlined by WorkSafe BC. As for personal aspirations, the master's isn't so much what's important to me out of this experience. It's actually to make change with the wildfire fighters themselves. I wanted to start a conversation with the BC Wildfire Services and interested industry partners to talk about respiratory health concerns. I believe that the research carried out over the last 2 summers has already started the conversation with BC Wildfire Services, as they're genuinely interested in the safety of their employees, and WorkSafe BC has also continued to financially support me personally as well as the project, as they're genuinely interested in investigating in this issue, as wildfire fighters currently do not use any respiratory protection. I'm not expecting change to occur overnight as a result of this project. I do think it's an important enough conversation to start, however. At the very least, I would hope that this project provides the BC Wildfire Service with research that helps fill any gaps in injury prevention, as they, as an organization, prioritize safety in every aspect of the job. However, if they don't have any research on respiratory illness, they can't make any amends. What's next for me? If you ask my supervisor, my immediate future is finishing writing my thesis. I keep asking my wife if the stay-at-home dad is an option. It's not. Even though I enjoy my academic responsibilities, it's hard to ignore the jobs that the wildfire occupation offers. You'll find me this summer working on the fire line somewhere in the province of BC doing at my next master's project. So I welcome any questions.
Have you thought about sort of respiratory apparatuses to wear for wildfires?
Yes, when I was a wildfire fighter, I purchased the best one that you could. They're all very passive. You can't have active respiration. The problem is on a slow day, it's great. As soon as basically shit hits the fan, you can't breathe, and it becomes a cumbersome aid, I guess. So there's not a whole lot of options out there right now. But this is hopefully starting the discussion to make a more efficient apparatus for sure.
Are there any long-term outcomes published
on that particular population?
Yeah, like people who've done that either like throughout their lives or even just for short periods?
Not that I can find. I can count on my one hand how many times Canadian wildfire fighters have been talked about in academia, and the United States and Australian wildfire fighters are much more known in academic studies. However, a longitudinal study really isn't looked at all so far. That would be the next step for sure.
I mean, exposure to wildfire, you would expect respiratory issues. Like you would have to expect those sorts of things.
Yeah.
You can't get it with asthma. They already filter you out.
It's quite an obvious answer almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, there's got to be some sort of like bravado persona for firefighters. Did you find some sort of pushback when you go in asking those questions?
I expected when talking to BC Wildfire Service that they would be apprehensive in letting me look at them. They were probably the most encouraging of the industry partners to look at their population. It's something that they're really concerned about, that they haven't had the capacity to look at themselves. And then when talking with wildfire fighters, just as a peer and also as an academic when studying them, they're also quite concerned about it as well. It's kind of a prevalent issue that they wear PPE for everything. When they're operating the chainsaw, they're wearing a hard hat, they're wearing anti-vibratory gloves, they have special boots, they have special flame retardant clothing. Every aspect of safety is covered except for respiratory health. So this is just kind of that elephant in the room that the BC Wildfire Service specifically is looking at trying to address. Cool. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Alex McDonald, who's an undergraduate student in health sciences.
Hi everyone and fellow research and design students. I'm Alex and I'm here to talk to you about air pollution in the Prince George area and what health problems stem from air pollution and what we can do individually to lessen the amount of air pollution you produce and strategies that you can use to protect your own health as well. So the picture shown is air pollution emissions within the Prince George airshed. So a little anecdote about myself. When I first moved to Prince George to start school here at UNBC, I don't know if it was just me, but the smell was really hard to get used to. And I kind of wondered what this perpetual stink does to my health and everyone else's health around me. So as you can see by the map, there's a large concentration of industrial polluters in northern BC. And beside this map, I have another one of the health authorities here in BC. So as you can see, Northern Health has to deal with the largest concentration of industrial pollution and the consequences of that. So there are many great sources where anyone can see what the air quality is like when whichever city they live in. So the first here is the Air Quality Index on the Environment Canada webpage. So the Air Quality Health Index is a scale that is designed to help people understand what the air quality means to your health. So this is the Air Quality Health Index on the Weather Network webpage. So it's a tool that's intended to help you make decisions to protect your health by limiting your short-term exposure to air pollution and altering your activity levels during increased levels of air pollution. So as you can see, it gives general recommendations for the general and the at-risk. So who are these at-risk populations? So mainly it's the elderly, pregnant women, and children. And also those with pre-existing heart and lung conditions are among the at-risk populations. But there are also other populations to consider as well. So another group that needs to be taken into consideration are the populations of people that live in the bowl area of the city where air pollution tends to be the worst and where there's lower cost of housing. So these lower socioeconomic status people with limited forms of transportation must also be considered as well as these at-risk populations. So now I've discussed the populations at risk and how to find out the air quality, but what does it mean for the air to be polluted? This diagram shows particulate matter, which is a mix of solids and liquids found in that atmosphere. So as you can see, there's a piece of sand, a piece of hair, and the particulate matter is much smaller than human hair. So smaller particles of particulate matter usually originate from industry, wood burning, fossil fuels, and other materials. Most particles in the atmosphere are results of complex reaction chemicals such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide. These are both Canadian statistics of what we produce.
Okay, so if there's a hold on your
Fire, flood, heat, and increased air pollution are all factors which lead to increased health risks for both urban and rural regions of BC as climate change continues. The air pollution and temperature interactions could further increase particulate exposure due to wood and smoke and more severe forest fires. So here's what particulate matter would look like in the respiratory system. You can see the larger particulate matter usually sits in the nasal cavity, nostril, throat, trachea, while the smaller PM will go more into the primary bronchus, the trachea, and the smaller will go right deep into the lungs, the bronchioles, and alveoli.
Hello, Catherine Nolan.
click webmail instead of
Hi, Barb.
So other serious effects related to lung damage can include damage to lung tissue and the development of lung disease which can include bronchitis, emphysema, pneumonia, pulmonary fibrosis, and lung cancer, as well as death. Other serious effects of air pollution can include irregular heartbeat, non-fatal heart attacks, and premature death with heart and lung disease. Temporary symptoms can also include irritation of eyes, throat, and nose, coughing, shortness of breath, and chest tightness.
Okay.
So now I've discussed all these health concerns, populations, etc. I want to discuss what you can all do to lessen your impact. There are many things we can do, but unfortunately, I only have time to discuss a few. So at the end, I'll discuss other resources you can look at to learn more, if you'd like. So firstly, try to drive less as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
If it helps, try reducing the amount you drive by carpooling, taking transit, walking, or riding your bike.
And she was
On the other hand, living somewhere like Prince George, there's a berries of cold winter, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't really like walking -30.
Yeah, I think you should invite them.
Avoid idling your engine if at all possible, mainly if you have a gasoline engine. It wastes fuel, time, money.
Yes, please.
And it's also really hard on your engine as well. Driving slowly for the first minute is also
I don't know if Stephen has to do for this, but for signing an MOU, yes. But for this, I don't think, you could CC him, but I don't think he would attend.
Use an efficient CSA or EPA certified wood stove to maintain your chimney and wood burning appliances so it can burn clean and safe. So this Burn It Smart program is one of the many programs you can look into, and there's also other ones with incentives that the government will give you to use a cleaner, more efficient stove. You can see the difference between the particle emissions in an hour there.
Yeah, I don't know what his schedule at all is.
Smoke is a complex mixture of gases and particles that can irritate eyes and airways and can possibly worsen respiratory illness and heart disease as well. So only burn wood when necessary and always follow local burning bylaws.
Okay.
And don't burn in there with air quality advisory.
Is our meeting that was set for 2:30.
So I'll leave you
Is
with a
that still
quote
happening, or
that
is this happening
contributing
in
to
Plain
clean
South?
air is everyone's responsibility. If you go in. If you want further information on the PG Air
Okay.
Quality website, it's a really good resource, as well as the Northern Health website, or also breweries is another one. And there's many other ways you can help,
Okay.
and you can learn about
Okay.
the average population and much more cool facts. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, thank you. Bye. Whoa.
Yeah. I didn't find the exact statistics, but it seems the winter is definitely the worst for worsening air quality. And then, of course, with the past summer, right, with all the forest fires. So it definitely depends on the season, but definitely I can tell you the worst season is typically the winter.
And in UNBC, like, do they rank the towns in terms of, like, where do we sit? I imagine it's fairly close to the top of the list.
It's fairly, I can't remember exactly where we sit, but it's fairly close to the top. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Alice. And you don't need.
No.
All right, so next up we have Lon from NRES, a graduate student from NRES.
So as Shana was saying, my name's Lon. I'm a new NRES master student here this January semester. So I'm just starting my project, but today I really want to talk to you about clean water. In Prince George, we're so lucky. We have so many water resources available to us. We trust our taps. We have rid of filters in every store, and guaranteed you could knock on a door and drink from their hose. But unfortunately, that's not the reality for so many places around the world. Mostly developing countries, industrial runoff and agricultural waste causes fish die-off, contaminates water with heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, and pathogenic bacteria. But even first world countries suffer from floods, catastrophes, and sometimes even if you look at the case of like Flint, Michigan, an old water filtration system starts leaking lead, and all of a sudden first world citizens are suffering from the same issue. So clean water is an issue. And if you look at the biggest concern, we're looking at water, or one of the biggest concerns, we're looking at pathogenic bacteria. So bacteria like E. coli, bacteria like Pseudomonas, bacteria like Salmonella, they thrive in these conditions. And some of these, you might be familiar with a lot of these bacteria. So if you look at E. coli, I've got an SCM of E. coli up right here. It's a gram-negative bacteria. It's actually found inside of human bowels, but if it makes its way back around to your stomach, it causes severe diarrhea. It can make you sick. Same thing with Pseudomonas. The next one coming up right here, you can get a fever, you get a headache, also contributes to dehydration. Now, one of the common things you'll notice with these pathogenic bacteria is they all cause the loss of water. So if you're drinking contaminated water, you'll drink more, you'll introduce more bacteria, you'll get sicker. But if you're fortunate enough to live in a place where you might only be introduced to this bacteria as like a food contaminant, you'll just spend a few extra days in the toilet. You'll drink some clean water, you'll pass it, and you'll actually, in a sense, cure yourself of this disease. But if you're drinking dirty water and you don't have that same access to clean water, you'll just be perpetuating the issue. So looking at diseases, the World Health Organization predicts that by 2025, we expect 50% of the world's population to be relying on contaminated water sources. 50% of the world's population. That's like 1 out of every 2 of your friends having to rely on heavy metal water, having to rely on pathogenic bacteria, having to rely on volatile organic organisms. These all contribute to like developmental diseases and millions of deaths every year. In fact, it's hundreds of millions of deaths every year. And every hour we lose about 200 children to just the disease itself. These are figures pulled from the World Health Organization. These aren't necessarily my own personal resources. And again, you can see the deaths are highest in developing countries, but they're not limited to developing countries. We still see them again in the first world. So we've got a few options. We can build complex waterway systems. On the left, on the right, left for you guys. There's a larger version of what we have for a wastewater treatment in Prince George, a fairly involved complex. And on the right, just a water well system. And having both of these components is important. You want to treat what you've used, and you want to treat what you're going to drink. And so my approach to that is using these special crystals called zeolites. And so when I say crystals, you think about these guys behind me, you think about quartz and amethyst and rose quartz. But the important thing is that you see those repeating unit structures, that they're consistent in elemental structure and that they're always building in a uniform way. My zeolites don't look anything like those crystals. They look more like playground chalk or like just regular dirt. But actually, these are really magical, special elements. And if you look at them at the electron level, you can see that these same dirt samples. Oh my god, I timed this one better, I thought. You can see these same SEM slides have that same repeating unit structure, just at the subatomic level. And using computer models, we can actually see that they have what we call molecular seeds. So these are the elemental, so in between atoms, this is what they look like. We can't see these visually, we have to model them with computers. And it's this pore that's so special. It's this pore that gives us the filtration capacity. And they're formed actually all over the world in volcanic eruptions. So down here in a magma flow, you would have all these, so this homogeneous mixture of elements. As it's blasted up into the sky, these elements form oxides. So you get iron oxides, aluminum oxides specifically. And as the ash starts to fall over the ocean or over a fresh water source, you start to see crystallization happen. And a lot of you are probably familiar with crystallization. It happens in like sort of two ways. You've got all these aluminum oxides in the water, and as they start to coagulate, they'll nucleate or they'll just start building on top of each other like Lego blocks until eventually you have this uniform structure. And then zeolites, again, just wanting to emphasize, the most important part is this pore right here. And this pore is where you can load things like CO2 absorbers or like antibacterial agents or like water hardness eliminators, right? So it's this pore that's like chemically active that we get to load with. What I'm working with is zinc. And so we're looking at making smaller units. So before I showed you those large facilities, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, but ultimately being the best case solution. These zeolite options, this is just a Brita filter deconstructed. You can see it's also made out of zeolite. You can stack multiple zeolite properties on top of each other. And you can even turn it into like a small cart and still be able to filter hundreds of gallons a day, or hundreds of liters a day, sorry. So I've only got like 3 experimental processes that are undergo. This first one is pretty much the zinc loading. So you've got the normal zeolite, typically filled with natural elements as it is. You wash those out. Sometimes they're heavy metals, sometimes they're simple like chloride ions. You load it with the zinc, and then that's your filter, and you can just run the water through that. The second part is elemental analysis. And so what we do is we digest those rocks, those zeolites, so that they're down to a liquid solution. And then we fire them through a fancy mystifier into a 6,000 degree flame. And that flame ionizes the metals, and they shoot through a magnet, and then we can tell what's there. And then the last part is just looking at these made-up figures based on previous data. We're looking at most of these bacteria only being able to like stomach a 2,000 ppm concentration of zinc in solution, whereas humans can stomach 5,000 ppm. So we've got a big range, sort of buffer range before we start to get sick. And then the last one being that filters are also lasting anywhere from 20 to 40 days. So you don't have to change them out so frequently. Hopefully this leads us towards dealing with the future water crisis, the growing water crisis. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about zeolites. Thank you very much. Guys have any questions?
So what zeolite? Where was that in your research?
Absolutely not. It took my supervisor 3 years to explain them to me. I wasn't in my master's for 3 years. Sorry, I was an undergrad for 2 years, and then within my first month, I figured it out. But yeah. I hope you guys understand it now. Any other questions? Sorry. Okay, cool.
All right. Yeah.
Almost on me.
So next up, we have Sarah Norris, who is an undergraduate health sciences student.
Okay, so hello, my name is Sarah. I'm a 4th-year health science student, and today I'll be presenting my honors thesis proposal. So my project is looking at the physical activity behaviors and perceptions among northern and rural medical and physiotherapy students. My supervisor for my honors research is Dr. Chelsea Pelche. So before I begin explaining my project, I believe that it's important to give a brief background on myself and what kind of got me into this research topic. So after I graduate, I have planned to apply to physiotherapy, and I've always been interested in exercise and exercise promotion. So physical activity is any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that result in energy expenditure. Physical activity can improve your mental health and strengthen your bones and muscles. Physical activity is also an effective form of treatment and prevention for most major chronic diseases. So the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults set by CSEP is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week in bouts of 10 minutes or more. So moderate physical activity includes activities such as brisk walking and bike riding, whereas vigorous physical activity includes activities such as jogging and cross-country skiing. So being sedentary or not engaging in enough physical activity leads to physical inactivity. Physical inactivity is one of the 4 key modifiable risk factors identified by the World Health Organization for overall morbidity and mortality worldwide. In Canada, at least 4 out of 5 adults do not meet the Canadian guidelines. So one method to improve physical inactivity are exercise prescriptions. Exercise prescriptions are a written plan of fitness-related activities that are designed for a patient. They can include different types of exercise with specific intensities and for certain durations. Exercise counseling is another possible form of delivery. Exercise counseling is verbally discussing exercise with their patient and offering exercise advice. Both physicians and physiotherapists can play an important role in providing physical activity recommendations to their patients. So I was curious how exercise prescriptions and exercise counseling were being utilized in the northern region of BC, specifically since the prevalence of physical inactivity and chronic diseases are higher in the north. Northern BC also has higher rates of obesity, a lower life expectancy, and they face many different barriers and challenges than their urban counterparts. So I conducted my first literature review. From my research, I found that exercise is more beneficial than medication for treating stroke and secondary prevention of coronary heart disease and diabetes. With physical activity, the risk for chronic disease can be reduced by 25 to 50%, and the risk for mortality can be reduced by 15%. In my research, I found there was limited available data on medical students and physiotherapy students. To my knowledge, I could only find one study looking at medical students in BC, but this study did not focus on the northern cohort. I was only able to find one study focusing on physio students, however, these students were from Australia. So the gap in the current literature brings me to my research question. I will be looking to see what the physical activity levels of northern med and physio students are, and if these levels correlate with their intentions to prescribe exercise in their future practice. I will also be investigating potential barriers for not prescribing exercise in future practice. Students will be recruited from the UBC Northern Medical Program and the Masters of Physiotherapy Northern and Rural cohort. There are 32 seats in the Northern Medical Program and 20 seats in the Physio Northern and Rural cohort. Each year, I will be including all years of each program in my inclusion criteria. So my study will be conducted using an online survey created on the Fluid Survey platform. My survey will have 3 sections and will take roughly 30 minutes to complete. The first section will ask about demographics to give us an idea as to who will be practicing in Northern BC. The second section will assess the students' physical activity levels. This assessment will be done using the Godwin Leisure Time Exercise Questionnaire. This questionnaire is commonly used and has been validated in other studies. Using this questionnaire, we can categorize the students into active and inactive based on the recommended physical activity guidelines. So the third section will look at the students' views and intentions on prescribing exercise and exercise counseling in future practice. This section will be set up using a Likert scale where the students will select if they agree or disagree with the statement. So I'm hoping to be able to compare the students' physical activity levels with their intentions to utilize exercise promotion strategies in future practice. It is hypothesized that students will have a higher level of physical activity, will be more likely to prescribe exercise in future practice, and counsel patients on exercise. So going forward, there are a few limitations to this study. The first major limitation is that this survey is being sent out through email, so it may receive a low response rate. Secondly, the physical activity level assessment is self-reported, which can lead to response bias. And thirdly, this survey is only being administered once, which could lead to a small sample size. The students may benefit from this study by improving their awareness of their physical activity levels, and will get them thinking about how and if they plan to discuss exercise in future practice. I believe it is important for med and physio students to maintain their health and promote healthy behaviors to their patients. Northern and rural communities may also benefit from this study. If we can identify that northern and rural med and physio students plan to utilize exercise prescriptions and exercise counseling in their future practice, and what barriers they may face, we can fight against those barriers and potentially improve the physical activity in these locations. Overall, I'm looking forward to the results of my study and what they represent. I would like to thank everyone for their time to come listen to my honors proposal. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I was interested in what you said at the end around what we consider normal.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if any of the questions on your surveys will, that not just the level of physical activity, but whether people feel they're in an enabling environment for physical activity.
Yeah, my survey will touch on what they like, what the perceived barriers are for their patients as well as for themselves for prescribing exercise. Yeah.
Do you have a backup plan if no one replies to yours?
Well, I feel like if there could be a low response rate, but if that is the case, I guess that would be a limitation of my study, and then I would talk about that and how to go forward with that potentially. Thank you.
All right. All right, so those are 5 Pecha Kuchas. I think what we'll do is have all of the, a bit of an echo here. We'll have all of the presenters come back up, and if there's any questions from the judges. Sure, yep. And is Odin here?
Yes.
Oh, perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Want to make sure. All right. Well, come up, take a seat. Awesome, thanks, Jeff. I think Juan's gonna grab one, right? Wait for Juan to get back. I'll start with a question, if you don't mind. What was the biggest challenge with this sort of format for you? Was this the first time that you've done a Pecha Kucha?
Okay.
We have a first question, Lon, is what was your biggest challenge with this format, and is this the first time presenting in a Pecha Kucha type format?
Yeah, kind of, I guess. I just did a 3-minute thesis, which was kind of similar, but without the slides. I think the biggest challenge for this was sticking to the time of the first slide. It's kind of like a strong question whether you want to have words that start a new slide, or if you want to carry an idea through and then revert back to a slide you just saw. You can't have 2 ideas on the same slide. You really have to keep them blocked.
Yeah, this was also my first time, and I think for me the biggest issue was finding real life pictures. If you didn't notice, a lot of mine were cartoon like, so that was probably my biggest issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was also my first time, and it was definitely difficult to find suitable pictures. And yeah, just getting enough time crunch is the hardest thing for me.
If there's one thing I learned too, that external note, that would definitely be the way.
Yeah, I think an advantage of the format is that it really forces you to think very clearly about what you're trying to do and how those pieces fit together.
And then kind of like a cool tool I thought about it, like I was trying to fit a lot of ideas on the one slide, but you can like stretch it out and sort of like I had the crystal slide on one, and then my zeolite on the next slide, and then the SEM on another slide. So I probably lost maybe 8 or 10 seconds there. It wasn't quite as fast as I wanted.
Yeah, I think I'd do it again. It gets creative, and I think it's a new way to present to your audience.
Yeah, I think I do it also. And the other thing that sort of, again, I think that having pictures was the real challenge because like I sort of had to like rely on Google Images for a lot of them. Didn't quite have all the ones I wanted, and I'm also not a very good animator, so like that's actually sort of a downside. I had to try and get an idea across using somebody else's pictures for it. Yeah. If anybody's a really good with Paint or another animation software, I think it's pretty much.
Yeah, I definitely like more visual presentations myself, so I think it's really helpful to have visual tools along with kind of explaining it. I think I definitely use it again in some form.
Great for general audience, a broad audience.
I have a question for Mike. I think it might not make sense. See if it makes sense. But I'm curious if you think there's a relationship between if say somebody's being sustained or exposed to the same amount of smoke, but 60 days in a row versus 60 days over an entire year. Yeah. Do you think that multiple days in a row that compounds smoke exposure?
That's what I'm hoping to find with the cross-shift investigation. Looking at it through other studies, it looks like the extremely acute short-term respiratory profile doesn't change. If you're just talking about day 1, day 2, day 3, as soon as you start getting to weeks, months, that profile starts to change a lot. If you get that exposure over the course of the entire year, I think there's enough time for your respiratory values to return back to your baseline. We're actually doing a respiratory recovery study now with some of the participants that we look at in the summer to get a good gauge as to how quickly does your respiratory values return back to baseline. But yeah, no, it's pretty interesting to look at that cross-shift stuff that we're looking at.
And for a Prince George Fire Department kind of thing, do you think they'd be incorporating that in how they do shifts? Like people wouldn't be able to have certain number of shifts in a row like that kind of thing that wildfire.
I would assume so. So that population is intuitively when I first started this project, I thought that they would be a very good population because they fight fire. It seems like a very natural population compared to two, but they're actually very, very different. Close comparison to wildfire fighter would be like a hard rock mine, something like that. Even then, they have respiratory protections as well. So a structural firefighter, they have built-in rest days. They also have a CBA pack, so they have pressure, positive pressure, air basically that they will utilize while they're in an area with high concentration of smoke values kind of thing. So I think they've also been studied in the 70s. That population is well protected for that exposure. The problem with wildfire fighters is the very transient group of workers. It's just a kind of temporary work that you do in summer. So it's not as substantiated as a workforce. You're not going to have as many protections established, and they have not been studied at all. So, yeah.
A question for Alex. Thanks for the presentation on air quality. Really interesting stuff and probably something that everyone in the room can relate to. There was a relatively recent news story that came out of Quebec within the last week that was talking about air quality in Quebec and talking about how air quality plays a greater role in gene expression than the genes that we inherit from our parents. So what a fantastic example of us actually embodying the characteristics of our place in a way that is really, really impactful and meaningful for our health. So I wonder if you come across, if you came across that article, if you've got any thoughts or reflections on it in the context of BC. And then just a really important point of clarification that air quality in Prince George, one of the reasons why it's bad in winter is PM 2.5 for road traction materials. It's mostly dust and things that we're breathing in as a result of trying to make the roads less slippery.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't come across that article. Yeah, that's very interesting, actually.
We'll touch base afterwards. I'll share it with you.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that would relate back to BC, especially in the north with we have the majority of the industrial polluters. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how that plays well here.
I have a question from your work. I was wondering how you got connected to the community and where you welcomed in and how you kind of formed that relationship and to be able to go.
I went to do participant observation over a 2-year period, and I was introduced to community leaders by a Peruvian anthropologist that was in the area before I arrived. So the short answer is I plan to go for a long time and to live there. I entered that specific community because I was invited by somebody.
Yeah. Did you look at personal connection or you just?
I had done my master's research on agricultural systems in southern Peru, the thing that both those projects have in common are the earth beings, and northern Peru is very famous for this genre of healing called sorcery, so I knew I wanted to go to northern Peru. Yeah, that's why I ended up there.
Any other questions or comments? I'm just curious from the audience and from the panel, with this research seminar series, what are some topics that people might be interested in hearing about next year? We've had quite the breadth, but is there anything that you feel like would be really interesting for students or something that you feel like hasn't maybe been profiled yet? Any ideas around that?
I think the biggest thing, especially with this format, is it has to be something you're passionate about. I don't think you could use this style to teach somebody how to use Microsoft Word, for example. You couldn't and this is how you do blah 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 in 20 seconds. Next step. Here we go. You kind of have to have the instructional stuff that work. So I think anybody, especially if you're looking for Pecha Kucha style, anything they want to talk about and tell a story, I think we all done a pretty good job of conveying our wonderful experiences or our wonderful research topics to you. And, all being kind of engaged, not slowly, but we'll work on that. But I think that story aspect works, right? Versus this is X and how we deal with it.
All right.
Did you already ask the gang about what that was like to do this Pecha Kucha format?
Yeah, we did. That was our first question.
Yeah. Any gems to share with me about whether it's a good idea or whether it's absolutely terrifying? We thought it would be a good idea.
Kind of both.
I was going to entertain and tell you it was awful. We all advocated it.
There will be counseling after this too, but probably even like in a box.
I think it's particularly manageable if you're seeking initial experience and doing such a presentation. Yeah. Because it's very structured and it's very short, and that makes it manageable.
Yeah. Well, we've just had a very exciting panel of judges discussion in the back.
It was 50 talk.
Alex is Sammy and Odin. Do you want to come up and we will make our really exciting announcement? So,
Margo, maybe if you want to start.
The camera. It has to be in camera.
Does that mean we have to come over there as well?
Yeah,
I don't mind.
I don't mind. Yep. So we've got we're really
very impressed by the quality of these presentations across different people's stages in their research careers. It really reinforced for me how much what's great about this format is it's especially good for kind of showing a scope of people at different phases of their careers. Like we've had a postdoc, we've had undergraduates, we've got sort of probably a couple of decades in terms of people's experiences, but it was a really relevant format for all of what you were trying to communicate. And so that's, I think, a really exciting thing for us going forward, that we like to show the range of health research here at UNBC, so this is a great example of that. And we also think that you all did a fantastic job. It's a tough thing to do, and that it was, a little bit of training, and kudos to Shana, who did the coaching, and for many people, and Damon in the background, that we had such a great combination. And we're very happy to, after the fisticuffs in the day, we've got some really exciting prizes to give out. So the first prize is, this is a prize, which is, I don't know how we'll go about this. Oh, you can do that bit. Sure. And you can do that bit. Okay. I'll get my fabulous. Anyway, so the drum roll is the most interesting and informative combination of images and content about life in Prince George Award goes to, drum roll, Alex McDonald. All right. And the most inspiring and informative insights into life in Northern BC that we didn't previously know about award goes to Mike. Oh, can we do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Just one comment for you, Mike. I think you should do this again, because I think it was great. But next time, as per my 6-year-old and his love of planes, you should add in the Thunderstruck. Gotta have that playing in the background.
When you have the band outside.
Yeah, exactly.
The laptop was on.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We'll forgive you this time.
And Lauren.
For you, Alex, you were doing a presentation on a complicated matter. Everything is we know about, but you did it well explained, and good job.
Yeah. And I forgot to properly introduce my fellow panelists. I'm just going to take a small moment before we do the rest of the drum roll. So Tammy is in the School of Health Sciences. Many of you will know Tammy, and so was very enthusiastic about learning about this format. And Odin is a master's student in NRES and was shoulder tapped for this last night. Thank you, Odin. But we thought it was a really neat thing, because part of the purposes of Pecha Kucha are to be able to communicate to people in different audiences who are not necessarily familiar with the topic. So we really got an affirmation that this was a good format for somebody who doesn't know that much about health sciences, except by family, maybe. All right, so the next rounds of awards are, so this was definitely the cool wow factor into a topic we knew nothing about before award, goes to Lon. And a comment to Lon? Yeah.
Yeah, one comment, Lon. Passionate in your presentation, and interesting topic, although I know what the best water in the world is.
Do I know what the best water in the world is?
I know it.
Can you guess from the back?
I told you before.
Iceland.
There could be some bias in the assessment that we point out. And there was a real sense that was a topic we knew nothing about, and we now know a lot more about. So thanks for that. And we also have the most likely to impress and be understood and relevant to grandma award, and that goes to Sarah.
It was great, Sarah. I really enjoyed how you explained your methodology and everything. Be confident. Sit up. Maybe one day Grandma will get a prescription for exercise instead of eating. That would be awesome. So hopefully you can spearhead that. Thank you.
Very cool. And finally, the most likely to make us Google for more award goes to Pecha Kucha.
Yay!
And yeah.
So very, very interesting topic, and I want to know, if I ever do go visit, which gullies do I avoid? Do they have signs so I don't have to worry about being attacked or something? Or like,
No, you need local knowledge.
I will look up with a local and be like, where do I not go? So it's great.
So with that, I really want to make a very special thanks to Shayna, who did a lot of work in the background making this and also coaching people to have the confidence. She even offered, if we didn't get enough people, to do one herself at the last minute. So, but a real kudos to you guys for all stepping up into this different space with some prodding in some cases. But I have to say that we ran the session and I was aware of hearing some people's early planning for the training session. I heard people presenting and figuring out how to do it. And with Lon in particular, I kind of saw you do the first little storyboard and he presented it to me and then I saw it come to life today, which is really cool. So look out for future, thanks heaps, Cami. Look out for future training for this sort of thing, especially you guys that are still moving through your undergraduate degree. Be inspired by your undergraduate colleagues that this is a really good experience, and we would welcome any feedback or thoughts as we go along. But yeah, big thanks all around. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.